So you've been playing Commander for a few months now, and you've maybe got a couple of pre-con decks that you want to start building out a collection around. In this video, we're going to go over black creatures that will perfectly fit that bill.
That's right, we're talking about foundational staples for Commander, good cards for any deck. Maybe you take them out in the future once you start to tune it. The video starts right now. Highest level of gratitude to our patrons who power the channel through Patreon. Check out the Patreon link in the description to learn about monthly giveaways, VIP Discord access, and even our official playmat. Hello and welcome to the day.
Thank you for spending your time with us.
I'm Jake.
I'm Joel. Welcome back to another episode of Jake and Joel Are Magic. We are going to go over foundational black creatures for any collection. Before we get into those cards, however, if you would, go down there, hit that like button if you like the video by the end of it. That lets us know to make more like these.
That's right. It's a great way to support the channel with just the click of a button. Also, if you want to get involved on a deeper level, head on over to Patreon and check it out. That link is in the description as well. We're going to be talking about cards today that are a great foundation, like Joel said, for like a starting place of a deck. Sometimes you might be throwing a deck together. You just want some cards to throw in it that are just good stuff cards. These are cards that get reprinted sometimes, but they all pretty much hold a good value. All of these today we're talking about are under $10. Let's go ahead and get into the cards. These are great staples. Again, foundational cards for a Commander collection.
So let's start off with Phyrexian Delver because it's going to highlight something that the color black does fantastically in Commander, and that's recur creatures from the graveyard. Delver's a 5-mana 3/2 zombie, but the text is what we like the most. Enters the battlefield, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Straight up! You lose life equal to that card's converted mana cost, but you could return a 10-cost creature with this, Jake.
Yeah, exactly. And what's really cool is you can reanimate this, and then it reanimates something. You can copy it, and now you're reanimating two things. There's a lot of degeneracy that you can do with Phyrexian Delver. This is a very strong card, and like Joel mentioned, it does exemplify what black is about, which is like reanimation. You lose life equal to converted mana cost, so it's all about ambition. What are you willing to sacrifice in order to win?
Yeah, I love Delver. It's good combo. It's good generically. Noxious Gearhulk represents another thing that the color black does fantastic in Commander, and that's destroy other creatures. 6 mana for a 5/4 with Menace. It ETBs, you can destroy another target creature. No other restrictions. It just can't destroy itself. And then if a creature is destroyed this way, you gain life equal to its toughness. So not only are you getting rid of a huge threat on the table that you don't want to be around anymore, but you're getting a little life back in the process.
Exactly. A lot of these Gearhulks that came out of Kaladesh are actually really good cards. I like Noxious Gearhulk a lot. I like most of the Gearhulks, but again, the fact that this is not restricted to a non-black creature or anything like that is really good. And then you're gaining life equal to its toughness, which is really neat as well. Very strong card, and again, Menace is excellent. It has to be blocked by 2 or more creatures.
Remember that with enters the battlefield creatures, if you recur them, say with a card like Phyrexian Delver, you're going to get that enters the battlefield again. If you blink them, meaning exile them temporarily and then they return themselves to the battlefield, you'll get that enters the battlefield again. So creatures with enters the battlefield, especially very strong enters the battlefield effects like Noxious Gearhulk, are going to be very strong overall in Commander.
It's a 6/6 for 5. Again, flying, trample, 2 big abilities for a card to have, and then it has pay 2 life to surveil 2. You can look at the top 2 cards of your library, then put any number of them into your graveyard, and the rest on top of your library in any order. This is a really good ability for a card to have, especially if you have big graveyard synergies. Again, we were just talking about Phyrexian Delver. Use Surveil to dig through your deck, get something big back with Delver later on. This card just represents a nice big body in the air.
Yeah, 6/6 is always going to be a pretty hefty creature in EDH. It's enough to start chunking somebody's life total down. And then you've also got this pay 2 life ability that you can do at instant speed. So in response to it dying, you get this sort of pseudo scry, and it's a different sort of scry, like Jake said, that plays into synergies that can be better than just putting it onto the bottom of your library. You get it into your graveyard instead. Jake, you talked about losing life and getting something in return. That is a huge design space for the color black in Commander. And Midnight Reaper sort of perfectly encapsulates what black does the best, which is draw cards and lose life. I don't think any color can draw you cards so cheaply because they're also tacking on the lost life in addition to the mana cost of it.
What you need to know about this card is it's a huge card in an archetype called Aristocrats, where you're just sacrificing things, draining your opponents, gaining life. It's a very brutal archetype in MTG, and a fine-tuned deck like that is going to do real damage very quickly. Midnight Reaper is fine and operates by itself, though. In just any deck, a creature-centric deck, it even if it dies, even if it gets removed, it's drawing you a card and you're losing a life. This card is very strong, nice 3/2 for 3. I love this card a lot. It's been very strong ever since it came out.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of its low CMC. Jake, let's go to the other end of the spectrum to a high CMC here.
Sheoldred Whispering One, 2 black and 5 other for a 6/6 with Swamp Walk. This card does so much, and we have played it specifically in our playgroup so long. This card has been part of our playgroup. At the beginning of your upkeep, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, and at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, that player sacrifices a creature. This is a card that once it resolves, it does so much. It is an instant... It instantly eats removal if your opponent has removal in their hand. It's just too much value for the player who plays it.
Yeah, if you get to untap after playing Sheoldred, you are in a pretty commanding position of the game at that point, and you've probably got a big target on you. But the downside of Sheoldred is that you do pretty much need to get all the way around the table and back to your upkeep to really get full value out of this 7 mana play. It doesn't do anything on the ETB. And like Jake said, because of how strong it is over time, it is a lightning rod for removal. However, Jake is right on the money. We have played this card since it came out. It was instantly one of my favorite commander cards as soon as it was released, and I've pretty much shoved it in every black deck since then, at least until you start getting down into the, refinement. Let's really focus on the strategy here, and Sheoldred may not fit that, but exactly what this video is about, which is generically strong foundational building blocks of your commander collection that you can just slot into any deck that takes that color. Sheoldred definitely fits that bill for me. Gonti's a more recent addition to that, meaning in the last couple of years, I should say, but it represents some card advantage as well as what I'm going to call removal on a stick. It's a 4 mana 2/3. It's got Death Touch, and that's the removal on a stick part, because once it's done its ETB, which we're going to take a look at, then it's just an on-the-ground blocker that's like, all right, attack me with your ground creature. I don't care if it tramples over. I'm going to get it as long as it doesn't have first strike. When Gonti enters the battlefield, you look at the top 4 cards of an opponent's library. You get to pick one of them, and that gets exiled, and the rest go on the bottom of their library. And then as long as that card is exiled, you can look at it, you can cast it, and you can spend mana as though it were a mana of any color. So you get to steal from the top 4 of their library. I've seen a lot of people pair this in blink decks to get this ETB over and over again, but I do like a little pseudo card advantage, a little pseudo steal, maybe even if you get their, Thassa's Oracle in the top 4 of their library
Hunter,
randomly.
baby.
Yeah, just
Combo
eat it
killer.
up. Put it up, put it exiled. And then you've got a Death Toucher that can kill anything that swings your way. I really like Gonti.
I really like Gonti too. That 3 toughness, it leaves a little bit to be desired. I wish it were possibly a 4 toughness, but for 4 mana, you're getting a lot of value here. Again, Death Touch cannot be ignored. That's a beautiful blocker for anything that it can get, or anything that it can block. But yeah, that card advantage that comes from that, being able to shut down an opponent's combo, this is a card, again, that is just good in any deck. You're getting something when you play Gonti off the ETB. Unless there's something out there shutting down the ETB, like a Topo Orb or something like that, this ability is going to go off, and you will get something from your opponent.
Yeah, it's a fun little Lord of Luxury. Jake, this is a much more recent card, having just come out in the last couple of sets.
And it is good to follow up Gonti with this. For 2 black, you get a 3/2 with Shadow. This is a pretty big deal. This creature can block and only be blocked by creatures with Shadow. So most of the time this card is getting through. If a card would be put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, instead exile it with a void counter on it. Even if this gets removed, that's still going to resolve. Those cards are still going to remain exiled. And then you can tap and sacrifice it, choose an exile card an opponent owns with a void counter on it. You may play it this turn without paying its mana cost. So Voidwalker can hit something absolutely huge. An Omniscience? Sure. Why not? oftentimes in EDH, people are trying to remove graveyards because the graveyard is the second hand. This card works very well anytime a player is putting anything into a graveyard, again, from anywhere. It's exiled instead with a void counter on it. This card gets to pick from everything. Everything that's being used on the table while it exists, this card has access to. Very strong.
Yeah, it's cool how it's offensive and defensive, which is what you were getting at. It can be defensive by preventing players from letting them put things into their graveyard, you know?
Sure.
But it also can go and pick from them later the perfect spell that you need, or the most powerful thing that's been exiled instead of going to their graveyard. So yeah, overall, Dauthi Voidwalker, especially for 2 cost, pretty excellent. After that, we've got another 2 cost creature that is excellent. It's Priest of Forgotten Gods, and it's got a tap ability. Tap it, sacrifice 2 other creatures, any number of target players, so this basically says each opponent, each lose 2 life and sacrifice a creature, then you get to add 2 mana and draw a card. The value that this can represent, sacrificing, forced sacrifice, that is so strong in Commander, because creatures will have hexproof, creatures will have indestructible, but sacrifice gets around those. So any Voltron strategies, stuff like that, really getting shut down by Priest of Forgotten Gods, as long as your opponents don't have another creature to choose. Getting a card draw off of sacrificing 2 other creatures, a tip here is have some token generators in your deck. Have some cards that are creating token creatures that you don't care about losing. Tap the priest, sacrifice 2 other creatures, doesn't say non-token, and then you're just sitting in value town.
Any number of target players, you can get to do that, even if you need to do that yourself. Say they put a Darksteel mutation on on your commander, for example, and you just need to get rid of your commander so that you can send it back to your command zone. You can target yourself with this ability. This card is very strong. Again, that cantrip on there, that draw a card if you're able to use the ability. I shouldn't call it a cantrip, but the card does have card draw built into it, which is why it's so strong as well.
Yeah, anytime that it's going to replace cards into your hand, especially if you're potentially sacrificing cards and not tokens, very good.
Yeah, next up we have Woe Strider. 1 black, 2 other for a 3/2. When it enters the battlefield, create a 0/1 white goat creature token. It has sacrificed another creature at instant speed here. No tap required on this, and scry 1. Then it will escape for 2 black and 3 other. Exile 4 other cards from your graveyard. You may cast this card from your graveyard for its escape cost, and it escapes with 2 1/1 counters on it. So it gets bigger when it comes back from the yard, which is pretty sweet. Going to come back as a nice 5/4 beater. Also with that sacrifice ability, you've seen a few Aristocrats pieces in this list with Priest of Forgotten Gods, Woe Strider, and then we also had one early on that I'm not remembering right now. But yeah, this is a very strong card again. Being able to scry, get through your deck, it's very strong.
Responding to your creatures being removed by turning them into value, even if that value is just scry 1, is potentially strong. That is a fantastic way to get around exile of your creatures. If your creatures are about to get exiled from a targeted exile, sacrifice it goes to the graveyard. Maybe you have access to it later. And so I've always loved instant speed sacrifice if it's a tap ability. If it's not, Woe Strider is just like a perfect version of it, because it's as much as you want to do it, as much as you've got other creatures to sacrifice, and it's turning them into scries. Plus, if it dies, it can come back from your second hand, aka your graveyard. It's just got a lot of value built into it. Generically good creature that maybe you want to consider as a nice response to targeting Darksteel mutation onto your commander. Okay, I'll just go ahead and sacrifice my commander and recast it later so that I can get around that. We've got one other 7 mana creature on here. We didn't want to go too high on the CMC. We've tried to balance this from 2 all the way up, but Sepulchral Primordial pays for itself for sure. 5/4 with Intimidate. When it ETBs for each opponent, you can put a creature card from that player's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So you get their graveyard onto your battlefield for your use against them. Super mean and super great.
And a super cheap card mostly. This is a very
monetarily,
very popular, monetarily, very cheap card. I love this because it does everything it needs to do on the ETB. That 5/4 Intimidate, it's beautiful. It really is. But the fact that this comes out, if you are in, this is in a lot of ways a meta play. But the thing about this card, and the reason why it's on the list, is because so many players gravitate toward creatures, gravitate toward big, splashy, fun creatures to play. And so more often than not, depending on your pod, this is going to be able to get a little bit of value from somebody. Maybe it's something small like an Eternal Witness from somebody else. Maybe it's something big like a Grave Titan from an opponent or something like that. But all in all, this card more often than not is always going to net back its value. The 7 mana cost is a lot, but if you're in like medium power pods, like this card is an absolute house.
Yeah, absolutely. It's sort of in direct contrast to what we talked about with Sheoldred. Sheoldred hits the battlefield and you really need to untap to fully embrace all of her power level. Sepulchral Primordial comes out, does its thing. If you can flicker it, if you can return it, it does its thing again on the ETB. And so you do need some circumstances to be in your favor, but you still potentially net so much value off of a card that has been reprinted a ton and is always going to kind of stay low in value and be easy to pick up. So that was 10 cards. This is our 11th card. We've got a special secret pop-up card here, and that's because this card is so sweaty and is so mean. It's Opposition Agent, 3 mana for a 3/2, and Jake, does it get any more mean than this Commander Legends card?
You know, this card didn't take off in a big way because a lot of people thought that it was really going to make waves in EDH, right? And or CEDH, sorry. And it didn't make a lot of waves in that format because it just, like you described, yeah, it does play, but like you described, it kind of comes down to sometimes it's a big move and sometimes it's not. And CEDH is all about big moves all the time, every moment. This is really cool, though, because you can flash it in response to your opponent doing something as simple as, you know, like searching for, you know, a land.
Yeah, cracking a fetch land.
Cracking a fetch land, anything like that. And then, you know, once it's on the battlefield, they have to answer it before they want to do any sort of searching at all. But yeah, while an opponent is searching their library, they exile each card they find. You may play those cards for as long as they remain exiled, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast them. And again, you do control opponents while they're searching their libraries. Very strong card, brutal. Again, flash is like the that's the special EDH word that's like, this card is pretty broken.
This is one of those cards that nobody's going to have a fun time when you play it. Maybe you will, but also your opponents are going to hate it. So maybe you're not having fun. So it was tough for us to recommend this to like start your collection, depending on where you're at in your Commander journey as you're watching this video. It's hard to recommend, you know, like I've been playing for 4 months. What should I buy? Go get Opposition Agent, buddy. You're going to have a great time. That's not maybe what I would recommend, but it is an under $10 card that will find a home in the right sort of meta and the right sort of decks.
Right. It is a very strong, very good foundational card that you can cut in the future once you're tuning for other synergies. But if you're in a very sweaty kind of pod, you more often than not are going to find times where this card can get you out of a bind.
That's it for our pick for black creatures. Let us know down in the comments some other themes that you'd like to see for these videos. This staple series is something we're going to keep going, but we don't always have to pick one color and one card type. Let us know what you would think that we should recommend as a good foundational group of cards for any Commander collection, and maybe you'll see it in a future video.
That's right. We're going to be all over the place with this series, but our goal is to keep it going and continue on with the Commander Staple series, laying that foundation so that you can just have good stuff cards for your decks while you're tuning them, getting them to the power level you want them to be. That's what this series is about. We hope you've enjoyed it. And until next time, we will see you next time.